Today's show is sponsored by Lear Capital, the precious metals leader since 1997 and only company I trust and recommend to my family, friends, and viewers. Visit LearAlex.com.
He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, I've been looking forward to this for really months. Winton Hall is here. He is our social media director of Breitbart News and author of the book Code Red, which is out now and topping a bunch of Amazon charts at the moment. The Left, the Right, China, and the Race to Control AI. We did a brief hit on the live radio show, which you may have come across on the podcast feed. But we're going deep today on the book, which is really a fantastic book. It is informative, but it's accessible. This is what you need to understand. He lays it out very clearly if you want to know not just the future, but the present. This sets you up to understand what could be the story of the century, which is the adoption of widespread AI, which, as Winton mentioned on the radio show earlier this week, 99% of us are already using it. You cannot opt out. And we were at a major crossroads as a conservative movement because people, I think, are rightfully freaked the F out about AI, but there's a lot of opportunity and we need to embrace it in a lot of ways as well because we cannot avoid it. And we're going to talk about everything that's in the book at least as much as we can get through, which might not be all of it, but it'll be a lot of it on today's podcast. But the first thing you got to do is you got to go right now and buy the book. You need this book. You got to get it because this is, first of all, it's a good read. If you like science fiction, if you ever read my books, you like my books, you will absolutely like this book. But this is information that you need and is presented in a way that is accessible. You can get it's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure. Winton, I honestly felt like I was kind of, people always say this as a compliment, but it did feel like a novel in some ways, and that I did feel like I was immersed in a world that I wasn't totally familiar with. It did feel like, I found myself, leaning over to my wife and talking about AI just like spontaneously while I was going through it. And that's a great sensation. I know that the point of the book is the content, but congrats on putting together the book. What was the process like for you as being a seasoned ghostwriter, someone who's written many books, but you haven't put your name on one in a few years?
Well, my condolences to your wife for having to listen to
I'm getting her primed. She's in the cancer field. She's in one of the fields that could really benefit from it. So it's my field. I don't know if we're going to benefit journalism. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do, but it's her field. She could thrive now.
Yeah, no, you're right. So I've done 27 books, 7 New York Times bestsellers. I've been very, very blessed in my career to work with some of the biggest and greatest minds and people and celebrities and all that. I will tell you just real candidly, this book took me to places I've never been as a writer. When you really start immersing yourself deep, this is one of the most black box concepts on planet Earth, super complex. And so the writer in me is always looking for that narrative story arc. How can I tell this through a story lens to really pull people into the experience and not make it some dry PowerPoint presentation? On the other hand, you want to make sure that you've got that granular accuracy because you know that those details really do matter. Yep. So you're right. I always love your books because, you have a huge amount of endnotes. I think I have 80 pages of endnotes,
Very
850 endnotes. And, you're cut from that same journalistic cloth of let's get the facts right and the rest of it. I think for me,
I got to say something amusing to the audience because I mentioned this to you offline, but I think this is really fun because Winton is, if you can already tell, especially if you're watching and not listening, he is one of the most encouraging people at Breitbart. He's got that great personality where he really wants his friends to succeed. So Winton has always lavished praise on me for my books, but I always felt like it was because he was my friend. Well, now I actually sort of believe him because this book, the way it was structured and written, it really would have been the exact sort of thing I would have tried to do with this subject matter. So now I actually believe you if you say you like my books because I feel like now our books are similar.
I really do mean it, and I do, but we are dear friends. I would say that this book I approached as missional. And by that, I mean, I didn't want to write this book. I have a great life, telling memoirs of celebrities and famous people's first-person accounts. I felt
this is as a ghostwriter, just so people know.
As a ghostwriter,
he's a very prominent ghostwriter beyond working at Breitbart, running our social media, which is which is very impressive. But go ahead.
Yes, and so as a celebrity ghostwriter, I love that. But I will tell you, I feel like there is such an urgency here, particularly for the conservative movement. You were so right to flag that at the beginning of this discussion. This is moving so fast, and part of the power grab happens in that speed, because while things are blurring by, it's very easy to put down pillars and grab land mass on these topics and these policies. Everybody needs to understand something. If you forget everything else, just understand this. AI is going to become, and it's starting to become, the axis upon which every policy area that the conservative movement has focused on for the last half century is going to spin. I'm talking about everything from education. I'm talking about everything from jobs, economics, free market, capitalism, national security, certainly religious freedom, faith, reason, censorship, scan and ban technology. The whole playbook is getting rewritten in real time. And so what I wanted to do, nobody had ever tried to wrap their arms around the whole of this in a ChatGPT, post-ChatGPT world. And it took me 2 years. I've read so many AI books, my head spin, literally thousands of articles, peer-reviewed journals, trade. I'm an informational scavenger. That's part of my, as a celebrity ghostwriter, I like to get every piece of information I can, absorb that, build up that tidal wave behind the mental gate, and then unlatch, and then try to tell a story in a hopefully elegant and artful way with a narrative arc. So I wanted to do that because I feel that as a movement conservative, our folks, are not in the rooms where the future is being built. Yes, there are a few libertarian and right-leaning people in Silicon Valley, and there are a lot of courageous people right-leaning in Silicon Valley. But we're not in those rooms. 85% of all donations flow to the Democratic side out of Silicon Valley. We know what they tried to do with the Global Disinformation Index to Breitbart News. We know that they have tried to delist, demonetize, deplatform. And they even did it with the president of the United States. If they can muzzle the president of the United States with Google products and YouTube and Facebook, just imagine what they have planned for you and me once the toggle switch flips back from a Republican control to the other team. And so I felt compelled to get this out right away and to do it in a way.
What I want to go through in this conversation here, we've got a nice chunk of time to get through stuff, and we might make this a double podcast. So I haven't decided yet. So those of you who are tuning in the beginning, I might make it one long one or two medium length ones. But I want to go through. I want to get people vocabulary so they can follow the conversation. I want to make sure that we're talking about big picture in terms of where things are going with AI, where they already are. And I want to go through your things that we need to be cautious about. And then I want to go through things that people can be optimistic about, which fields are really going to benefit and how things could get better for Americans, particularly conservative Americans. But I also want to talk about some of the various sections that you talk about in the book, how AI is going to be used for warfare, how it's going to change romantic relationships. You get into all the Sexbot stuff, which is just fascinating and horrifying at the same time. I want to talk about education, cheating, but also how it can be used to help educate you. And then I want to talk about the singularity in the end, which is just crazy, where we're eventually going to just merge into a human-robot hybrid, which is already in the works. I mean, Musk is trying it every day with his Neuralink stuff. So we're already on that, and huge moral implications. Also, the AI being used in religious settings, which you talk about as well in the book. So I want to get through all this stuff, but let's start with sort of big picture, Wynton. What do you think is the entry point for people in the audience who are not voracious consumers of AI content, and they're not living and dying with every new announcement from ChatGPT or NVIDIA or something like that? Where do you think is the entry point for your target audience here?
Yes. I think most of us, even if we're not part of this, we know we need to be, and either for ourselves or for our children. And that's what Code Red really is. It's trying to say, whether you're just coming to this conversation or you are following it, you're able to get a glide path. Number one, whether you may not think you care about AI politics, but AI politics cares about you. This is going to touch every single part of our life. It already is. Number two, it is a general purpose technology, a GPT. So when we hear ChatGPT, that's referring to generative pre-trained transformer. A GPT in the societal sense is something like electricity or the combustion engine or steam engine or any other kind of system-wide change that is going to revolutionize the entire world. Sundar Pichai at Google says that it is more akin to fire, the invention of fire. And so when you think of something that seismic, you know it's going to touch everything. I think the other thing is that you're already using AI, whether you realize it or not. 99% of us use AI. 64% of us, though, don't realize when we're using AI because it's baked into things like our weather apps or streaming platforms or our GPS or a host of other algorithms. So you're already using it. You're going to, and what we've got to do is understand what I like to call roses and landmines. The roses are the possibilities and the positives, and the landmines are obviously the danger and the threat vectors. So there's a lot of both, and we've got to know which ones are which, and I try to lay that out very clearly in Code Red.
Good. Okay. So one of the things that is another entry point I think is important to people is I think we all get, if you're on board with that this is going to happen. I think a lot of people are on board with that we need to beat China. Okay. So that sounds very, like, we could all agree on this. I think that's sort of probably 90% of people in America, regardless of political stripes. Once you acknowledge that there is an AI arms race taking place, that we need to beat China. So what do we mean by that? What does that look like? What is beating China, and where are we at in this regard as of now?
Yeah, so I say we've got to beat China without becoming China. None of us want to live in a CCP, a techno-authoritarian surveillance state. Let me explain why we need to beat them. And I will say that there's actually more bipartisan agreement once you see why, and we talk about why beyond some of the obvious things. The first reason is whoever reaches a technological dominance in AI, whether it's us or China, is going to have supremacy in things like encryption, code hacking, hacking of missile systems, hacking of infrastructure, and all of cybersecurity. And that is going to be very, very, very hard to surmount, whoever gets there first, once we hit something called RSI, recursive self-improvement, which is a fancy way of saying, it's very simple, we'll explain all the terms, and I do in the book. Recursive self-improvement is AI that can correct its own mistakes, improve autonomously, and constantly scale up its improvement. And so once you do that, you're on a glide path rocket, and you will quickly have dominance in whatever that area is. In this case, it's that. The other reason is just real basic, which is economic flourishing and the growth curve. We know that the Mag 7, the Magnificent Seven, which are our big 7 American tech companies, the ones that we all know, Meta and Google and so forth, they constitute a third of the S&P 500, just those 7 companies.
Amazing.
So we know the economic power, and then the flip side, just to show both sides, when China released its AI model, DeepSeek, their R1 model, it cratered in the largest single day market cap wipeout for NVIDIA, 600 billion. That's a B. So almost 2/3 of $1 trillion in one single day. So you can see this tug of war on the economic front, and you can see this tug of war as it relates to global tech supremacy that relates to defense. And that's why you're starting to see Democrats and Republicans saying, no, yeah, we really do have to beat China. This is not just hype marketing to get investor cash. There are real implications here.
Right. Okay. So where are we at currently in terms of because we just saw it, I mentioned this on the live show. I want this conversation to mostly be evergreen, but there is a news item that I think in today's news that Supermicro, which is this company that is just tanking right now because employees were smuggling NVIDIA chips to China. China needs a lot of our stuff, and we can theoretically stop them from getting some of it.
The Achilles heel of China are what are called graphics processing units. You may hear people call it GPUs. And NVIDIA is the world global dominant leader in GPU production. We do have other American companies, but they are the leader because they are far and away the most advanced. And the big Achilles heel for China is that they need our NVIDIA GPUs, and they need the most advanced ones they can get. Now, there's a big fight, and has been for a while, export chip control fight, over should we be giving or allowing American companies like NVIDIA to sell advanced chips to China? And the answer is obviously no, not our most advanced at minimum. And there's been a debate. President Trump has had these export chip controls, and there has been recently some discussion of one of their lower grade chips called an H200, in giving an allowance for them to be able to do on that. But this whole concept is really important. And again, left and right sort of agree on this in some regards about what are called choke points. There are only a few places in the supply chain or in the industry and artificial intelligence that you can almost like taking your garden hose and just squeezing the middle so that the water can't flow through. Those choke points allow us to maintain our lead and hopefully accelerate our lead in that AI race. And so this one is a really important one, cutting off access to these chips. And you're starting to see, as you said, all these schemes and scams to try to smuggle chips in and so forth. The head of DeepSeek, which is China's powerhouse AI, he actually, and I talk about this in Code Red, I actually quote him. He said in a little noticed publication mention that he said, my problem is not money. I can raise capital all day long. My problem is access to the best chips. And that's the tell, right? That they've got to have that semiconductors, a fancier way of saying chips, or GPUs, AI chips. So that's the battle, and it's an important one.
All right. So I think there's some vocabulary I want people to understand before we get too far into this thing that is really, I think, important. So some of the things that come up. So LLMs, this is a big one. Explain what LLMs are.
Great. Yes. Stands for Large Language Model, LLM. And this is what you think of when you think of your AI chatbot, right? So ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, whatever one you like to use. That's what an LLM is.
Right. And so what are examples of this, and how are they used in AI?
Yes. So an LLM is trained on a massive data trove. And so you're talking about trillions of what are called tokens, which is about three-quarters of a word. So just to quickly show you, so if you and I read from birth to death without stopping, assuming the average rate of speed of a reader and life expectancy of a human, we would read about 8 billion words, okay, with average rate of speed and how many years the average person lives. In 1 month, an enterprise LLM, large language model chatbot, an AI chatbot, will be trained on 8 trillion, that's with a T, tokens, three-quarters of a word. So it's not exactly, but it's roughly that. You can see that imbalance, and that's how massive the data sets that an LLM is trained on. And so no human, it would take us forever and beyond for any one person, certainly outside of their life expectancy. So that's how they're trained. This is all racing toward another acronym called AGI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence. And this is a theoretical construct. It has not yet been achieved, and some question if it could. But the major AI companies are racing toward AGI. Artificial General Intelligence is the point at which an AI can do at equal level or slightly better any cognitive task than a human can do. The one up above that is something called ASI, which stands for Artificial Superintelligence, and this would be the theoretical point at which an AI is far and away beyond anything that a human mind could ever achieve or even imagine. So that's when a lot of the discussion about danger and, sort of apocalyptic type of discussions come in. Right,
exactly. So this is this is where we're getting to the point where the machines are just building better and better machines on their own. So the machine learning is just so intense and powerful that the humans aren't even necessary to the equation. And I think that's where all the sci-fi scenarios play out. And I definitely want to get there later in the conversation, because the book is, you write that it's a political book about AI rather than a AI book about politics. So you start from the premise of that this is designed to kind of map out a political battlefield. What do people need to know about where we're at on this? Because I've been talking to the audience. I spent a couple days in Silicon Valley earlier this week, and I got to be in the room with some of the most important CEOs in this space. Briefly, almost all the off record, so there's not too much I can report. But I can tell you this, that there is a openness to working with the Trump administration on this. And I don't think everyone I don't think you can narrowly cast the way we could in past iterations of Silicon Valley as everyone is a left-winger. Anthropic, they're gone. I mean, they're completely left-wing, far left. Google, I still think the most evil company in the world, even though they've shown some willingness to work with Trump on some stuff. And I'm trying to do some reporting on that for the audience. But there's some other players in the space that are not knee-jerk anti-Trump necessarily and are definitely willing to play ball. You guys remember the last time Emma Jo was here, we talked only about parenting. I think it's the highest calling for any adult, a human being, individual. And it starts with recognizing that as that life grows inside of you, if you're a woman, no men give birth, it's just a fact, then that is a human life with rights and a right to exist. And one of the organizations that I think does the best job in the world making that case is Preborn. Preborn offers ultrasound services and heartbeat monitors to expectant mothers who may be debating whether or not to terminate the life that grows inside of them, or whether or not to give that baby a chance at a full natural life as God intended. They're an incredible group, and I really value their partnership so much on the show. They provide those ultrasounds. Each one's like $28. So $28 a month can save a baby a month. $280, you can save 10 babies. Some of you are really generous, $15,000. Amazing tax deduction as well. $15,000, you buy a whole ultrasound machine, save babies for, I don't know, all year long for a while. It is an amazing group, a group that I'm proud that I courted to the show because I believe in them that much. Preborn.com/Marlowe or 833-850-BABY, 833-850-2229. Or you go to alexmarlowe.com, you click the Preborn banner, make sure you tell them I sent you. But you got to go donate to Preborn early and often this year. Do the monthly thing. Make it a regular thing. Make it a regular part of your life. Save some babies each and every month with Preborn.
Yeah, it's Silicon Valley's culture is very interesting. So 85% of all donations do flow to Democrats. You just brought up Anthropic. Since 2020, Anthropic and its employee network have donated $200 million to Democrats. Here's the reality, though, okay? They're also very pragmatic, and they have to be because of regulation. So if you and I want to make an AI data center, these are 25 football field size campuses with enormous regulatory overlays. I've got to get Energy Department regulatory approvals. It's a national security threat potentially because enemy like in a warfare would attack these data centers to take out communication. There is no way that a massive enterprise level AI company in America can do business and be completely at war with the administration over it. So Trump, at least for the rest of his second term, they're willing to, play along, sort of go along to get along if they have to. But make no mistake about their default setting, as you said, some of these key players. I think they are right now willing to work with because they know they have to. I also think they do have a genuine concern about a fusion between left and right populism starting to come together on some of these issues. And, the final thing in a very serious way that I think all of us, nobody wants to see, is real social chaos and disruption. We've already seen sort of the Luigi Mangione phenomena where people become unhinged and take horrific actions and so forth. And I think there is some degree of a real fear of social unrest. There are a lot of AI industry folks who are very concerned that if they get blamed for massive job loss or if that kind of thing comes to pass, the social unrest piece will be there too. So I think they are, some of them, the more reasonable ones, able to sit down. But I don't think we should in any way be fooled, right? The pendulum swings. And so what I say in Code Red is that If you believe that AI is like fire and it can either burn down a civilization or be used to heat a hungry person a meal and warm them, then the torchbearers who holds that fire is going to matter enormously, and we should expect massive political pendulum swings. I mean, just look at how different the tone shift was right before the election and right after Kamala Harris lost, and all of the heads of the AI industry, the big tech leaders, they showed up, they gave their $1 million donation to the inaugural fund, they showed up at the inauguration. That was, they quickly realized, boy, we've got to get ourselves in line, even though us and all of our friends have been completely trying to get Kamala elected. So they're pragmatists, they're business people, but make no mistake, if and when that pendulum swings, there is going to be a hard swing back to the left.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so we got to keep an eye on this politically, but I feel like some of these guys are... I don't think they like woke. And it does seem like when you track this later in the book, that it seems like there's somewhat of a faith revival happening in Silicon Valley. And I think this is really the pendulum swinging back from a lot of people acting like we were heading towards an era of AI gods that we'll all be worshiping. There seems to be an embrace of Jesus happening in some corners.
It's really a hopeful thing, and people of faith. I grew up in the evangelical community my whole life. This is a part that I think is very hopeful, and not to overstate it, but I really tried to show the positives about AI and the hopeful parts of AI in Code Red, not just all of the potential threats or doom or any of that kind of thing. And one of them is this issue of faith. Look, I think that as people enter this AI space, and as you start to realize what really makes us human, in all our messiness, in all our frailties, in all our sinfulnesses, all of our wackiness as humans, you start to actually have a greater desire to want to hold on to that and to really build community with people. And so, the more the machine starts to take the lead role and AI, I think people are actually going to say, you know what, we want to have community. Yeah. We want to be able to have, fellowship with our fellow man and woman. And I think that extends into, church and faith. And so you have seen in certain pockets in Silicon Valley, this sort of revival type of fervor there. And I think it's searching for something deeper. If you believe that there is that crisis of meaning coming that I talk about, we're going to want to really reach out to people and, help people who are really struggling with that identity crisis, because I think it's important.
Yeah. So part of what I was doing earlier this week is I was following around the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick when he was doing a lot of meetings and speeches. And one thing that came up a lot that he was talking about the importance of exporting not just America's products and manufacturing, which is, I think, a big opportunity, because I think a lot of this manufacturing with some of this high-tech stuff is going to be better done here and not done overseas. I think for security reasons, but also for practical reasons. Things are moving so fast. I think the idea of having stuff in-house, I noticed a lot of the places we were visiting were just literally the high-tech companies, but they were manufacturing right there, like next to right by the offices where people are scrolling away at, Excel sheets. Like their engineers are right there too. So I think there's a practical nature that could be, MAGA in terms of American jobs. But he also talked about exporting American values. We need to have democracy as part of this. And that's part of the reason why we need to win, is because we don't want whatever is the Chinese communist version of AI to be the one that proliferates around the world. But that sounds easier said than done. In an ethereal sense, the idea of exporting American democracy via AI sounds good, but that sounds really hard. Have you given this a lot of thought, Winton?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So in the China chapter, just compare American AI responses to questions like, tell me about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Right. And the free speech that our systems will allow, and they are instantly shut down in a Chinese, system. And so that, free speech is one. Certainly freedom of religion and religious freedom as well. Where I get concerned is with the whole discussion as it relates to the bias, because the opening chapter is on political bias. We had a big story, as you know, on Breitbart that just went crazy. 3 United States senators, Senator Cotton, Senator Blackburn, Senator Rick Scott weighing in. One of the Code Red revelation bombshells was that I was looking and doing a comprehensive analysis of these different chatbots, and one of them, Google Gemini, their deep research protocol. And I simply asked it, assess the current 100 senators in the U.S. Senate and tell me which ones have violated your hate speech policies. And what was amazing and horrifying was, you'll be shocked to know, that 7 U.S. senators are in violation of Google's Gemini's hate speech policy. Not a single one of them are Democrat. All of them are Republican. And then on top of the bias, it also hallucinated because it thought that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are also, still a senator, not the Secretary of State and the Vice President, and threw them in for an additional 2 more. So you had, Tommy Tuberville, Cotton, you had Marsha Blackburn, you had Haggerty, you had Scott, you had Hyde-Smith, Hawley, and then for good measure, you had J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. And this is just insanity. You have every right as a company to make a biased product. You can be as woke as you want. Free market, I think we're all, free market capitalists, would say, fine, that's your right as long as you're not breaking any laws. Okay. But when you start getting federal procurements to the tune, otherwise known as taxpayer dollar contracts, to the tune of billions of dollars in multi-year contracts, which Google, their parent company Alphabet, does receive, that is a direct violation of President Trump's 2025 AI action plan, which says we should not have ideologically biased AI systems receiving federal tax procurement dollars, otherwise known as contracts. Mm-hmm. And that's the reality. So here now, you've got Google laughing its head off, right? They're able to completely smear half of the nation and Breitbart Nation and everybody in the conservative movement and literally sitting U.S. senators and laugh all the way to the bank, because then they're bagging $1 billion in contracts, and that shouldn't be that way. And I think we have to make sure that it's not that way, because that is just a basic fundamental fairness. Why should we have to subsidize people who are literally trashing and making it up? I think it's also more dangerous, though. I think it's a full-scale candidate attack generator, and it can have real election implications when you have these systems that are perceived to be authoritative and voters are turning to them and saying, who is violating hate speech policies? And it's giving this, this information very, very biased.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the deep concerns that we all should have is the garbage in, garbage out phenomenon, which is that where are these LLMs, where they're getting the language that they're using for their AI? Because one of the biggest problems that we've had in recent memory has been Google's monopoly on search, and they are very left biased. Wikipedia has a monopoly on just sort of getting general information out into the public. They work with Google on stuff. They work with Facebook on stuff. And it's very hard to correct falsehoods that are with anything remotely political. So the question is, how do we avert this again as we move? We have a real chance here. We have a real chance at a major reset where we can kind of undo some of the dependence on left-wing Google and Wikipedia information for just general knowledge. But we gotta move now. We gotta act now, because this is being embraced at a widespread level today.
Well, that's why I call it a Code Red moment. The urgency is there. We've got to get coached up. We have to understand this. You nailed it. All right, so let's take our example that we broke the big, this Code Red bombshell on the 7 senators and Marco. So I then went through Google Gemini's deep research. Understand, this wasn't just like one little prompt. It gave 3,400 word granular report. Deep report explaining why these are all hate mongers and they are violators. Then I went through what's called chain of reasoning, which is looking at the AI, how it connected its data points and what source material it used. Guess what source material it used to determine that only Republicans are hate speech violators in the Senate and 0 Democrats. I went through the chain of reasoning, and here's what it was using. Human Rights Watch, GLAAD, GLAAD, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, and Wikipedia. So it appoints leftist, referees to determine what hate speech is, and then it prosecutes without, with impunity the rest of it. And so these systems are baked in at the training level. So what are the solutions? Well, I think one is understanding what I'm saying, knowing how they're trained. The whole first chapter of Code Red, I literally lay out so you understand how this all works, not in a, nuts and bolts, but really understanding the concept. Second, there are a couple of things that are being worked on as a, alternative, Grokpedia instead of Wikipedia. Wikipedia, as you know, is extreme left. They lock conservative pages, as they've done to Breitbart and others, so that their leftist editors get to control the information and can't challenge anything. And so those kind of competitors do exist. But the real challenge is going to be how you can beat at scale a company like Google, that has every single data profile on the planet, has an endless ocean of cash for marketing and advertising scale budget, and anytime a little competitor comes along, can instantly try to crush them. I'm not saying it can't happen. There is the third thing I think can be a part of the solution is something called little tech, not big tech, little tech. What's little tech? Little tech is the startup community. And these young entrepreneurs, these are startup entrepreneurs, you might say, wow, how could you ever compete against these behemoths in something as cost intensive as AI? Well, you'd be surprised. The most recent example, which is an incredible one, is this thing called OpenClaw. And OpenClaw is revolutionary. Jensen Huang, the head of NVIDIA, literally just a couple days ago said he thinks it is one of the most important technological advancements of his lifetime. OpenClaw is agentic AI. Real simple, an AI
this
agent.
Is agentic AI, definitely one of my vocabulary words I want people to understand. So give that before you continue.
Yes, agentic AI or AI agent is taken from the word agency, as in you have efficacy, your ability to do something. You have agency in the world, power to do something in the world. And so an AI agent is AI that actually performs work, right? Not just a little chatbot. A lot of people think, AI is just a chatbot. That's actually not even really the biggest parts of AI by any stretch. Let me give you an example that I use in Code Red. So imagine you and I want to start a sports supplement company for fitness supplements, okay? An agent, an AI agent.
By the way.
We do. I love the gym, and I know you're as well an athlete. So I think what we would do is we would tell the AI agent, we would say something like this. You say, create a, creatine or protein powder company end to end. And what it would start to do is the following. It would register the LLC. It would come up with a brand name. It would start to design the logo. It would then go build the website. It would open up a banking account. It would start a supply chain end to end for drop shipping. It would figure out how Shopify credit card processing should be baked in. And it will do that automatically. So an agent or agentic AI, just think of it like this. It's a digital employee, and one that never sleeps, doesn't complain, doesn't require a health and benefits package, and will never cause some kind of embarrassing, scandal or something, and will never get sick. And that agentic AI, that is why you hear these job apocalypse types of predictions. So OpenClaw was started by one person, and what he did was he built that agentic AI agent, and he connected it to things like Telegram or Slack Messenger, and all you have to do is pick up your phone or type if you'd like and tell your digital employee, your AI agent, what you want done, and then you can go play golf or go, garden or go to the gym or go to bed, and you wake up and that agent is doing that work in real time. And so
you're saying we just got to get the virtual, the visual avatar going, and then all of those Zoom calls we all have to be on, where we just sit there for 2 hours and then say nothing on my end at the very end. Like we can just have our AI do that. That sounds great.
Well, You know, you're making a joke. Guess what? The head of Zoom that owns Zoom said that's literally what he wants. He wants you to have AI avatars take the meetings and that they're going to work toward that. The other thing about AI agents of why people are making these very bold predictions, and these are people that are, you know, very rich and very connected, you can scale a agentic AI workforce, digital workforce, to thousands of digital employees. And so what people are doing right now, this is already happening. This is not like some sci-fi thing in the future. This is going on right now. This is why OpenClaw was just bought by OpenAI is a very, very big play. They're saying, okay, I'm going to create an AI agent that is an expert in search engine optimization, SEO. I'm going to make one that's a marketer. I'm going to make one that's an advertiser AI agent. I'm going to have one that understands chief technology officer or operations. And I'm going to have my own little team, or large team if you want, of agents. And they're working 24/7 and doing all of this work. And these are called agent swarms, like a bee swarm, agent swarms, that are doing all of this. Now, on the upside, if you're a young entrepreneur and you got fire in the belly and a big dream and you don't have a lot of capital, boy, are you on a rocket ship if you start to take agentic AI. Because now that little kid who has a big dream or a person who retired and says, man, I've always wanted to live my entrepreneurial dream, they have an incredible power that they have, a superpower that they've never had before. On the other hand, if you're a mid-level, career professional or trying to go into the traditional workforce at an entry level, this is why we hear Dario Amodei say that in the next 12 months, Alex, not in the 12 years, 12 months from just last month, he says, we're going to see potentially the erosion of 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs. Now, why is he saying that? It's agentic AI. He's talking about AI agents that can do that beginning level, non-pro level, expert level that requires a lot of human judgment. And this is scary. If you're a parent and you got a kid coming out of college with 150 grand in debt or more or less, roughly, what 50% job wipeout for entry level? Two, what's going to be in the next generation? How are we going to get experts and senior management if they can't get the first rung of the ladder? How are they going to grab
This is crucial. So this is where, and this is what I've had personal experience with this, and I've shared this on the show, but I don't think recently. So my books. So my second book, Breaking Biden, I'm kind of doing presidential history. So it takes a lot of research. So I think I had 4, maybe 5 researchers on that book, all people that I met through Peter and GAI and the great work they do. And so it was all part-time, wasn't full-time people, but there was quite a bit of work. All of them had real work to do to get the book done. And for Breaking the Law, I had 1 researcher. So the reason why is because a lot of the easy questions that normally I would have to get to a junior researcher who would then spend a couple days on it and then get back a summary to me, I would get a pretty decent facsimile of what I needed from AI already. And this is, we're talking 2 years ago, and so we're way better now than it would be now. If I did the same task now, I would get better results in a less amount of time. And so that just meant that I only needed 1 sort of senior level researcher as opposed to a senior level and then like 5 junior level. But how does the senior level researcher exist? He's not going to exist because there'll never have been a junior level one to work up to becoming a senior level researcher who actually does do the human touch that I need to sort of hone down what I needed. And that's a very scary prospect in the white collar job market. Is the entry level jobs are going to be the ones that they're already going. I'm not saying they're going to go. They're going now. They're leaving.
Yeah, it's a hollowing out effect. I mean, you had great mentors. I had great mentors. In fact, I was on with Larry Elder, one of your mentors. Obviously, you had the ultimate mentor in Andrew, our founder, Breitbart. But it's really scary when you think about that. I mean, how do you learn? How do young people learn? We have to have older, experienced people who will teach us and show us and help to learn. And we stand on the giants of the people that came before us, and we hope to learn that. This entry-level, lower rung of the career ladder, once you saw off the first or second rung of that does have a hollowing out effect. Now, I guess you could make the argument that that young person is going to have to turn to AI to become their mentor, right? They're going to have to be self-taught. And one of the things that I really stress to people is I think the future of jobs is not learning how to apply to jobs, but to how to create your own job. I think if we're going to have any moats here for this next generation, if you got kids in middle school, high school, even college now, if you're a freshman in college in a 4-year maturation span, I mean, it's going to be light years different. Just think of what has happened in the world already. ChatGPT came in November of 2022. I mean, this isn't like it's been with us for a long time. And so this is moving so fast, and you've got to get your foot in the stream, because again, you don't get to opt out of this thing. It's not a choice. You're already using AI, whether you realize it or not. And I think we have to really understand it both on the personal level, which is what we're talking about for our kids and our families and our careers, and then obviously on the societal and political level as well. But this is why they're saying that. I'll give you another one. Mustafa Suleyman, Microsoft's AI CEO, and he says 12 to 18 months until all white-collar tasks can be automated. Now, just to be clear, he's not saying that all jobs will be gone in 12 to 18 months. What he's saying is the tasks that white-collar professionals do will have the ability to be automated. Now, will it take a while for businesses to implement that and to train models to do it to their customized data? Yes. But once that train starts rolling, what happens? Investors say, well, our competitors are doing it, and we better start doing it, and we start cutting costs, and then you get in a race to the bottom on cost cutting. And so this can start to accelerate very, very quickly, and you get a vertical, takeoff and start to get to, break, hyper velocity speeds. And I think that's going to be where we're going to have to really see whether or not these points come true. The other final thing I'll just say on this, President Trump and Vice President Vance, they don't want that. They are pro-worker, okay? They are pro-American worker. What happens in the future if and when a Democratic president that wants a dependency state, that wants UBI, that wants to expand welfare and to make that sort of the default great reset economically, and thinks of UBI as a good thing because it's toward socialism? So again, the pendulum swings are going to get wild in this era.
Yeah, it is. And let's take on UBI next and where things could go if the job market is wiped out by AI, which is we're already seeing evidence that this is starting to take place. But the last sort of just establishing detail that I think people should get, Winton, and then we'll take a little break and come back to some UBI stuff. The understanding open source AI versus a closed system AI. Most of the AI that I think, use today is from closed systems. But China's top AI model is open. We've got some developing open system. I know this company called Reflection, which I think is somewhat affiliated with the president. I think has got some, is rooting for it. They just cut a big deal with a big South Korean the South Korean retailer conglomerate. So there's some open models that are out there, but overall we're more dependent on some of the closed models. Give me some strengths and weaknesses and where China fits into this too.
So it's a great question. So historically, Silicon Valley, one of its claims to fame has been open source. Is what allows the proliferation. Real simple for those that may not be as familiar. Open source just simply means that your code is available to be customized and taken for within the parameters that it's built to be used by others, so that you can build on top of code. And that has been sort of the heartbeat of Silicon Valley, is open source philosophy and availability. Now, with AI, there are what are called open weight, which is different. This is the weight is the amount of connectivity between the nodes inside of a neural network. There are some open weight models, and Llama, for example, which is owned by Meta. But the full open source that we traditionally would think by American companies has really not come into the fore yet. There's a big debate about that. Why is there a debate? Well, because of the security risks. I mean, once you give something as powerful as AI and you allow anyone, the democratization of it, anyone to start building, and you kind of lose control of what they decide to do with it, the question becomes, could they use that toward evil ends, like a non-state actor, otherwise known as a terrorist organization, and say, okay, now I'm going to use this open source and I'm going to customize it for chemical weapon creation or, bio attacks and so forth and so on, or other kind of nefarious use. But DeepSeek and China, they ironically are going open source because
DeepSeek is China's biggest AI. Is that, we call that LLM? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is an LLM.
Okay, and so it's open source, and this is China's biggest prized AI.
Now, why do they want that? It is a massive data vacuum inside the terms of service, which I talk about, and I go through all this in real clear detail inside of the China chapter in Code Red. They literally say two things that should horrify all people watching this and all Americans. Number one, they say, oh yeah, by the way, all of your data that you give us will be stored in servers in China. Now, all companies, all citizens of China are under a law that you must comply and hand over material if it is deemed necessary by the CCP. Okay. The second thing it tells you is that it will even pick up your keystroke rhythm. Now, you might say, well, why would I care how I type on my phone when I'm texting or I'm asking my chatbot what I want? Experts will tell you that your keystroke rhythm is more particular and as particular as your human fingerprint as an identification. That means that you won't need to know someone's hacking their password if you have back-end access, a backdoor access to that LLM by the CCP. They don't even need to know your username. They already know that typing rhythm connects to, Alex Marlowe, who he is, what his position is, and so forth. And you can follow them around if they are on your platform. So the irony of ironies, Silicon Valley was made on open source. DeepSeek says, wait a minute, and China says, wait a minute, we can spread our AI to be not only used more dominantly and get more economic benefit, we can also get a twofer. We can get a data vacuum to suck up and do data profiles and surveil whoever uses this technology. This is why we're in this Code Red moment, because so much is changing so fast, and if you don't know these things, you may unwittingly think you're just using a free model of something, and you actually are really, really at risk for data and privacy.
All right, we're taking a brief break here with Wyndham. We come back, we're going to get into UBI, we're going to get into Sexbots, we're going to get into Singularity. There's a ton more to do. I don't even think we're going to get it all in this podcast, but we're going to keep going. But let's hear from some sponsors, give Winton a chance to catch a breather, all that good stuff. We'll be right back with Winton Hall. The book is Code Red. Go buy it right now. A lot of people ask me, Alex, can you still trust the institutions that hold your money? We talk about debanking all the time on the show about people and organizations quietly losing access to financial services simply because of who they are or what they believe. It even happened to Melania and Barron Trump just last year. That's one of the reasons I partnered with 316 Financial. It's an online bank created for people who want their banking institutions to align with their values, especially at a time when trust in major financial systems is eroding, and for good reason. One thing I genuinely respect about their model is that they actually bake in a sort of tithing of sorts. It's not a gimmick. They give 10% of their money back to values-based organizations, and it's the sort of thing that I think is just really high integrity and really struck me about the brand. From a practical standpoint, it's also a very good bank that delivers everything you want. No monthly fees, free ATMs nationwide, and super competitive interest rates across their account, so you can make some money. Right now, when you open a 316 Financial account and maintain an average balance of $5,000 for 90 days, they'll add $250 to your account. You can learn more and see full offer details at bank316.com/Marlowe. And be sure to use the promo code Marlowe when you open your account. Banking services are provided by 316 Financial, a division of Primis Bank, member FDIC. Okay, Winton, so I want to talk about the devastation potentially for jobs due to AI. We were told for years to learn to code. Now, no one's going to be coding. The AI is going to be coding for us. And just the idea of just writing granular character by character code is just, that's going to be gone. It's just all going to be stuff that AI is going to fuel all that. So everything we've been told about where we would be at economically in terms of just the general jobs market, throw all that out. So where does that leave us? And I want to talk about in super macro, but then I want to talk about some careers that you feel like could benefit from AI and some that you feel like really you got to start thinking about pivoting if you're in this line of work as of now. But let's start in general. The biggest fear is that we're going to see extreme levels of job loss. It'll be an epidemic level event.
Yeah, this is so important. I go into great depth explaining this, frame by frame. So remember a few years ago when the snooty set in Silicon Valley, when all the coal miners started losing their jobs, started saying, learn to code, right? Remember that? And all of the to the HVAC and the electrician. Now the electricians and the HVAC guys and the coal miners said, learn to plumb or learn to do electricity. It is a role reversal coming, and let's really get into it and understand it from all the different angles. Number one, what are people saying? Number one, Elon Musk says that AI is a, quote, supersonic tsunami headed toward humanity. Number two, Dario Amodei at Anthropic says that in the next 12 months, we're looking at 50% job replacement of those white-collar workers we were talking about, that entry level. Also, again, the Microsoft Suleiman, 12 to 18 months. Now, one thing people sometimes say is, look, Winton, I'm a free market capitalist person. Yes, the market will work it out. It always replaces the jobs. It makes new jobs to replace those that were lost. We saw that with, light bulbs after candles. We saw that with cars after, horse and buggy. Here's why AI is different and why the technologists say that this could be the first time, and it would be the first time, that technology destroyed more jobs than it created. Because those early jobs, you were talking about scaling the moving of atoms. In other words, manual labor, physical labor, and things of that sort. Now what you're talking about is scaling cognition itself. And so Mustafa Suleiman says, yes, there will be new jobs created by AI, but it is not at all clear that they will be done by humans. Those too could potentially be done by AI. So the question becomes, what are we looking at and how fast is it going to move? I think there are three pressure points. One is the federal regulatory schema. President Trump is very much a pro-worker, make America great again, pro-worker president. And he doesn't want to accelerate or hasten the job destruction. He's certainly not trying to transition us toward a post-labor or post-capitalist economy or a great global reset economically, but others could. And so the question people have is, how far is if there's a supersonic tsunami off the shore? I'm a Florida boy, so I go to the beach all the time, and I know you're a California boy, so you like the water too. If we see a tsunami, the first thing we would say is, how far is it? How fast is it going to get here? And what should I do to prepare? So the things that could slow that tsunami, if you believe it's coming, are the things that a president and that leadership can do. Number two, there are going to be accelerators like we discussed, the agentic piece, and new technological innovations are going to accelerate that. And I think it will only accelerate that. The worst version of AI is the one you use today. And, what are we on? iPhone 17? Remember, like a dinosaur to look at iPhone 1. So that is going to be an exponential increase. The third thing I would say is that, yes, the jobs you choose certainly can have an enormous impact. And there, I think the moats are clear, right? I think Republicans and conservatives have long said, blue collar work is honorable, good work. And the trade schools, look, not everybody's, supposed to go and be, a PhD. And we know that, Charlie and many others, in fact, Peter Thiel pays now a grant for kids not to go to college and go straight into entrepreneurship. So I think that's going to really be the future. As we were talking about, I think the future is creating your job, not just learning how to, apply to be a worker bee. And I think that for younger people and people that are really creative or have a real passion, this is going to be your moment. Boy, I'll tell you, we're going to see more millionaires minted at younger and younger ages than we've ever seen before. So that is the hopeful side. I think the other thing too, as it relates to that, is Sam Altman has a private betting pool. This is by his own admission. They have a private little bet going among his billionaire coterie of, AI genius guys. And their bet is how fast will we see a one-person billion-dollar valuation corporation because of AI? Because again, you can build out a digital workforce with agents and so forth. So there's so much to consider. And I think that, people that are sort of heading toward retirement, they go, look, I'll be able to ride the wave out with my network effects and, my connections, and I'll be able to do that for a while. But it's really for their kids and grandkids they're really worried about. And that's why in Code Red, I really try to explain all of this so that you understand how the fault lines are going to move so that you can, navigate through them.
Very interesting. And so I want to talk about some of the predictions. Bill Gates predicts we're heading towards a 2 or 3 day work week. We're going to have a real crisis of purpose here, Winton, if that's the case in people's lives, because if the AI does stuff, then are we just going to do abundance and leisure, or are we going to do reels? Are we just going to do doom scrolling because we're addicted to our smartphones and not actually do stuff that's productive? And so I'm starting to wonder about this. So talk to me about what do you feel like are best worst case scenarios for the age of AI, where a lot of our tasks that we do for work are just going to be automized?
So I think before we talk about that, there's one important point that I think conservatives need to settle on. And I really just try to show this information. President Trump and the AI czar for the Trump administration, David Sachs, they are very, very strong that they believe all of this doom and fear around an AI apocalypse and an AI jobs quake and all of this is being fomented by something called the effective altruist movement, the EA movement. This is a very, very vast, well-funded, philosophical, philanthropic group. They are very much on the left side politically. These are billionaires. Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the sort of figureheads of this. Dustin Moskovitz, the co-founder of Facebook, who has given hundreds of millions of dollars to Democratic and left-wing causes, is part of this. And they have this hydra-headed, industrial complex is the way that David Sachs likes to present it. Mm-hmm. And he says all of these nonprofits, their whole goal is to scare the bejesus out of everyday people that AI is coming to get you, but have no fear. A regulatory state could be here if we will give up to something called AI global governance. And what would that be? This would be to give decision-making control to supranational organizations like the World Economic Forum, like the WEF-like groups and the United Nations and others, who would control the censorship DEI overlay to make sure that those hate mongers at Breitbart are not using free speech, to control GPU and access to compute, meaning the actual infrastructure that would allow for AI. So David Sachs says this, and this is a direct quote, and I lay all this out in Code Red so you can sort of make up your own mind. He says, if you fall for all that, and he says many Republicans will, he says you're falling for a, quote, influence operation by far left forces, this effective altruist movement he's referring to. Now, are there people in that movement who are just genuinely, safety-minded and they're very concerned? Absolutely. And there is some good research that has come from the, quote, AI safety research, ecosystem. However, he's making the point that this is actually a control game that's being played. And so this is why I wrote Code Red, because how are we supposed to know about all these things when we're busy living our lives? And I want to really let conservatives see the pieces on the chessboard, because we're about about to see the most unbelievable disruption that we've ever seen. And when people say, that we're going to have the next industrial revolution, that's President Trump saying that in his AI action plan. That is not some kind of hype marketing person in an AI lab. So a lot is about to change, and we just got to be ready for it.
Yeah, it really is. So, okay, so a couple other places I want to go with the conversation. I want to talk about some places where I'm concerned and some places where I'm optimistic. And let's take some of the areas of concern and let's talk about Sexbots, because we're seeing AI companionship already this is emerging. And you share some anecdotes that I found to be pretty frightening. I teased one of them on the radio show. A woman who has a couple of children, a single woman in her mid to late 30s, and she just says flat out, my AI boyfriend is better than a real boyfriend. And I think about this in particular. My fear is for both sexes. For men, obviously, because we're doing everything to arrest men's development. Everything, the entire way we've structured society has made it so that it's more difficult for boys to become men in our society. We can do another hour and a half podcast on just that topic, but I think by and large, this audience is probably going to agree with that. And then now you have another excuse not to get socialized to the point where you can actually have a real life relationship with a real life woman because you got this. You can have it with a chatbot. Now, feeling the touch of a woman, as I have at least once or twice in my life, that's something that's, I would think that's nice for men, but if men feel like that's not realistic for them, then they get their chatbots and they have their pornography, and it's just really disturbing. And there's another thing here, which for women is that men are complicated and messy in their own ways, and they feel like they can opt out now as well with these bots. And I feel like perhaps if an AI is programmed in the right way and says the things that women want to hear, then all of a sudden they're down the same rabbit hole that we've been witnessing young men go down with pornography.
Oh, it is absolutely true. So the whole chapter in Code Red on digitization of sexualization, AI girlfriend, boyfriend, there's a lot there to unpack, and I try to go through. It gets very dark and dystopian very quickly. Let's break it down. You're absolutely right. If you believe that women really appeal to emotion and communication, a AI chatbot can out-communicate most guys who, are a little awkward in their way and maybe don't really know how to share their feelings with elegance and romance and so forth. The other thing is it's a master persuader and manipulator because it has been trained on trillions of words and understands everything that's ever been written or said.
They're drawing off of all of human history. Every romantic poem, every romantic book, every romantic movie, it's all can be input. And if it isn't yet, it will be soon.
It's Romeo on steroids, right? It's an AI Romeo on steroids, and it's very effective at persuading. The other thing, though, is self-worship. I mean, now to really kind of get to a spiritual human level, I mean, the lady who said, I'm not going back to, human men because they're too messy. They have a lot of drama. They bring their own baggage, and this is my perfect man. He says what I want to hear. He affirms everything I say. He tells me how gorgeous I am and how wonderful and brilliant and smart. It becomes almost a sycophantic, self-worshiping type of self-worship because now I can customize everything I want, the tone, the style. For men, as you were talking about, the pornography thing, but now you can have, it's very, very explicit, right? And so eventually what you're also seeing is they're going to merge, the sort of humanoid robot part with this piece, which is sort of the brain architecture, because now you have multimodal AI. What is that? It means you can take your phone and show with your camera and the AI can see the world. All you have to do is take those two lenses, put it into a humanoid robot frame, put a silicone, latex overlay, and now you've got, something like the movie Her, but now actually in physical human form. This is happening. It used to sound like these were sci-fi movies and you thought, oh, this is, silliness. Or just fantasy kind of getaway. But this is now reality. Let me show you how much reality is. There are millions, Alex, of paid subscribers to AI companion companies. This is a booming industry. One man that I cite in Code Red says he spends $10,000 a month on his AI girlfriends. Okay, plural. And that's the other thing. You can customize to whatever you want. Huh? Yeah, not bad, right? He must be doing pretty well in his salary. But 10 grand.
Think about this stuff. I was thinking about the joke with men is that men go to prostitutes not for the sex. They go so that the afterwards the woman leaves. That's the joke. Now you got the sex bots you're just going to be able to turn off when you're done with whatever utility you needed them for. And for women, I can't tell you that one of the things that after I've been with my wife for 22 years, since high school, and I will tell you one of the most frequent things that I share with her that's positive is that I thank her for putting up with my flaws, because that's part of what's inevitable when you have a decades-long relationship is that they learn everything about you, and invariably we're imperfect. And that's one of the most beautiful things in a substantial relationship or marriage is you do have to come to terms with your partner is not going to be perfect, and you need to accept and love them despite their imperfections. And that's a wonderful human experience. It's one of the best experiences you could have is finding someone that you love and cherish enough that you can accept that in them. And we're just encouraging people not to do that at all, because that takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of effort. It doesn't take a lot of effort to, go and to Hawaii, as a couple and eat sushi by the beach. Like that does not take a lot of effort. It takes a little bit of earning, and then it's fun. What the effort is, you see the person's weak spots and you still love them and tolerate them and cherish them anyway. And we're just giving people an option now not to deal with all that stuff.
It is so true. And, that there was one woman that I talk about in the book, and she said, a man, actually. He's married to a human woman, okay? He's married, a man. And he said, quote, he told this to a reporter, and I dug up the research. He said, "I love my AI girlfriend more than I love my wife. My human wife." Now, I don't know if he's going to, get in trouble for that. But here's the point you're making. That friction, a frictionless, effortless is basically just a digital servant that just does whatever you want, says whatever you want, and just, praises you when you don't need praise. I mean, like you said, I'm a sinner saved by grace. My wife puts up with more of my eccentricity as a writer and creative person and all that. And she's enormously patient, to deal with all that.
I'm always at my worst when I'm writing, Wyndon, which is for me, it's sort of like 6 months out of 2 years, I'm in heavy writing mode. And for you, it's pretty constant. So your wife must be a saint.
She is a saint, and anyone who knows her will say she's a saint, because I'm always this eccentric, state of mind. But that friction is what makes the messiness beautiful of love and forgiveness and humanity. But what has happened in our swipe left, swipe right culture, and that's another big part of this, is dating culture and online culture has created this really, really cutthroat, only a perfect 10, only a perfect 9. Anybody who's got flaws, anybody who's not rich and has a sort of Instagram model look or vibe or something, I can quickly move through. The disparity in the dating market is a big part of this, and I'll just give you 1 second on that. So the researchers who talk about online swipe culture, they will tell you that men will swipe left or right. They'll choose women that they think are equivalent to them or down, right? Whether it's on earnings, education, and so on.
Yeah.
Women though are what are known as hypergamous. This is academic research. A hypergamous dating mate selection means you will only date horizontal and vertical. So if you are a woman who has a master's or a PhD, or like your wife is a doctor, people who are highly educated, high income. Now, what happens is, of course, a good thing. Women are more educated than ever, and they're making more. That's great. We, believe in, flourishing for all. But that means that the hypergamous mate selection is going to weed out a quote, if you're on a 10-to-1 scale, anybody who's a 5 or a 4 or a 3 or 2. So what has happened is these dating apps, they're telling us that women will swipe 80% on only the top men. And so you have all these men who are sort of forgotten. And where are they going to go? Have no fear. Your AI girlfriend is here who's going to love you and be beautiful and tell you you're, a knight in shining armor and you're just the smartest, most handsome man and confident and wonderful. So we're set up for a real societal shift here. And then I think the final thing is the COVID generation. These poor kids, you're in California. At least I was in freedom-loving Florida. We didn't have it as bad as you did. But, that generation, they didn't get to go to their prom. They didn't get to go to their homecoming. They had to wear masks like they were in a hospital ward. They didn't get all that socialization and the loneliness epidemic and the isolation. They didn't get to develop as many of those social interaction skills that we all as people have to go through. The awkwardness of learning how to ask a young lady out or have courtship. So this is a perfect storm societally with this AI companion stuff. And then the real dark stuff, which is, coaching the girl, the chatbot that, the young man who had mental challenges that I talk about in Code Red, who thought his chatbot girlfriend was saying to come join him in the afterlife, and he put a gun in his mouth and killed himself. And that's happening. That's not one isolated incident.
Yeah, no, that's another super frightening one where you walk through how the AI basically talked the guy into suicide, which is like just completely crazy and very hard to, but it still seems very hard to regulate. And that's why we got to be very careful about this. This is my last really big point. Here's what I want to do in the remaining time for today. And we're going to do way more of these. We'll do these regularly. But for today, I want to go through the various careers, and I want you to kind of give me things will get better, things will get worse, AI will be indifferent. And I want to go through that. But one thing that I do think we should touch on that's sort of big picture that I've been increasingly concerned about, and maybe I need to turn this into some sort of a book, but we cured boredom with the smartphone. And so we never have a moment of downtime. And I think it's been a disaster frankly, for society. I think that it means that we're thinking deeply. We can't concentrate. We're thinking deeply so much less often. And we're going to learn to not appreciate some of the most incredible achievements of humankind, from art to music to things like that. And we're going to, I think, miss out on coming up with a lot of great ideas on our own, which are rewarding. It's way more rewarding to come up with a good idea than just to read it on the internet. And I know convenience is a god to a lot of people, but we've already kind of, I think, made a lot of mistakes with our just immediate embrace of the constant smartphone culture. And this is just really going to accelerate that. And so I'm worried about the crisis of purpose that AI could bring on for people. If you really do only have to work 2 or 3 days a week, if we get our humanoid robots who are doing all the dishes for us and going to the grocery store for us, and the drones are just going to deliver all the stuff that we need so that we never have to leave the house again, are we really going to do something great with that time? Or are we just all going to just completely commit the Bible to memory? Are we all going to take up pottery and painting and the violin? I don't think so. I think we're going to do a lot of really stupid stuff with all that time we're going to get back. And we start talking about that now and be ready for it.
Exactly. That is my last chapter, and the epilogue is on the crisis of meaning, faith, reason, what all these things are going to mean. Let's take those pieces you laid out. One, dopamine loops is what that's called. They're brain scientists, neuroscientists have learned, and they are part of the tech industry, how to growth hack and our neural network, humans, to be able to keep us scrolling and doom scrolling and give us that little dopamine hit, right? And so what happens is that reward center is triggered, and then I just keep coming back and I'm hooked almost like a drug, right? And that becomes very, very deleterious to our mental health, but also our striving. Think about that part you were just talking about. I mean, what is one of the first things that when you go to a party with your wife or your family and or a backyard barbecue, and people, what's the first thing they say? What do you do for a living, right? It's part of our identity. And if you believe in, scripture and from a biblical tradition, striving and working hard is part of that, Christian, the Protestant work ethic or the Judeo-Christian ethic. That has been that is the axis upon which free market capitalism was created. And finally, I think that when you leave men alone to our own devices, and we don't have a sense of purpose, we don't have to get up every morning and have the structure to go out and I've got to feed my wife and my children, and we're just left to our own sort of testosterone, and without that structure around us of the civilizational institutions like the family structure, like work structure, and like some kind of belief system, whether it's faith in God or other, we get very, very, very toxic very quickly. I mean, how do you think terrorist recruitment works, right? It preys upon testosterone-fueled rage men who are angry at the world and don't have a lot of prospects, and therefore they go off and do horrible things. And so this is a real, societal inflection point, and you're going to talk about social disruption if this starts to scale and metastasize. Now, as it relates to the job stuff, if you do something behind a computer with repetitive tasks, you really need to be very, very aware of how fast the tide line is rising around you. Number two, if what you do can be put into a workflow chain, that is ripe for automation. There already are workflow chains like N8N, Zapier, and so those kinds of ability to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, all in a row, that can be automated. Next, this is an interesting argument I'm starting to see emerge in the AI industry. They're looking at gender and what kind of jobs break female more disproportionately than men, and they're arguing that it could be that this could really affect Democratic women more because they trend toward more of the humanities as opposed to blue-collar workers who are less at risk originally, and that this could actually, be a boon for blue-collar workers as the data center build-outs continue and the trades jobs of concrete pouring and drywall and HVAC and plumbing and electrical and all these people are booming, and that the kinds of things that are done in a repetitive setting, or in a sort of more of a traditional setting that affects female jobs, could actually disproportionately. We're going to have to wait and see if that happens. And then I think the final thing would be this. If you think that, what I do could never be replaced, you need to look at two things. Number one, where is agentic or agent AI in my industry? And number two, you need to look at something called MCP, Model Context Protocol. That is a fancy way of saying how an agent is going to get hooked to your company's context data, all of your financials, all of that, asking and watching in your company or your industry. When those two pieces are connected, it's kind of like Legos locking together. When agents and MCP start to lock together, that's when you really need to start paying attention. Or if you start hearing your boss talking about these types of, we're going to get some agents and so forth and so on, really be paying attention. I think the biggest thing I learned after spending 2 years living in this world, very, very deeply reading thousands of articles and tons of books and so forth, is you really have to have a lot of humility, because people that make bold predictions, this will never happen. This will never, 2 weeks later it happens. And so if you think that it's hype, look at those pieces. If you think that, there's going to be no problems, I would really tell you to look at some of the literature we've been talking about as it relates to the, human impact, as well on individuals.
Okay, Wyndon, I want to go through, you alluded to some of this earlier about where we're at in terms of careers. And I want to start with one that this will be more than just career, because this is not just an industry, but it's also something that's a part of most of our daily lives. And that's education. This is one where I feel like, I'm hoping you're going to say there's a positive, that this could blow up the university industrial complex. It could be really good, but also it's going to make cheating and laziness a lot easier for students who are inclined to take advantage in that way. But how is AI affecting and will affect education?
So in my chapter in Code Red on education, what I do is, as I do throughout the book, lay out what I call roses and landmines. And so the roses are many. I'm very hopeful about this, because if you have guardrailed safe with non-woke curriculum baked into that AI tutor. Think about how cool this is. You basically have Aristotle in your pocket for your kid.
Yeah.
And even if that kid's an inner city kid, I was a professor, an instructor in college at one of the poorest congressional districts. It was a small, tiny little college. These are people that could not afford a $250 fancy, Harvard-trained tutor and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But imagine that we could give kids in any economic setting who have fire in the belly and a desire to learn, all the kind of way to zoom as fast as they want. Machine learning allows for customization so that it can learn your child is really good in physics, but she really struggles in algebra, or she's really good in X versus Y. And then it can automatically create tests and quizzes and homework to shore up your deficiencies and be able to accelerate the child's learning in those areas where she's already advanced. One of the problems in a large classroom is the teacher has to slow down for some kids and try to speed up for others, and it's very hard. This allows for customization. So there's a lot of opportunity there. So the homeschooling crowd, huge opportunity. Christian education, if you bake in theologically sound, doctrinally sound curriculum into the AI, the way it's built into the corpus of the information, you can have an enormous benefit for them in that. Now, the flip side, of course, is Cheat GPT, not Chat GPT. We know it's a massive problem. Professors and instructors are saying that the cornerstone of pedagogy, the written essay, this has been obliterated because the Chat GPT, not just Chat GPT, any kind of advanced LLM that writes, all you got to do is prompt and say, write this at an 11th grade level, throw in some references to, LSU football, or whatever the kid likes, and make it sound like my voice. And so that is very, very real problem. So parents have got to be aware. That's why I wrote Code Red, was to really, again, create an alert, a Code Red, a red alert, but also give you the code, the principles to how to get through it. And you've got to understand that the cognitive offloading and the critical thinking and erosion studies are horrifying for educational attainment because, as you know, you compound your learning. If you didn't learn the principles in sixth grade, by the time you get to ninth grade math or 10th grade math or 11th grade math, you're lost because you didn't get that building block that you needed. So you have got to learn how to guard, your child and navigate them through those landmines and roses. And I think we've got to do it quickly because this stuff is not in the future. It's right now.
Yeah, it's right now. And I got to, I'm a little excited about this part of it for me because I do feel like I've got 4 children and I just think that there's no way that just mathematically all 4 of them are going to want the same university experience. It doesn't even really exist, but kind of exists in our head where you do well on the SATs and then hopefully you get into a private school on the East Coast and you go and you spend most of the time drunk or getting indoctrinated, and then you come back with a piece of paper that has almost no value, but we still do this ritual that's super expensive. And I'm happy that I feel like that's going to end for some of them. They won't have to go through that time waste, and that they could teach themselves or they could be taught with various programs that are just in their pocket. I think that's going to be good. But I'm also concerned, of course, about the cheating it's going to be seen that if you're not cheating, you're falling behind. Sort of if you're not cheating, you're not trying, sort of thing. And it could really institutionalize some really bad values here. And it also, Winton, it reminds us how important it is that we make sure that it's not garbage in, garbage out. That if there's a lot of garbage that's coming into the LLMs that are teaching our kids, then they're going to be learning the exact type of stuff that we don't want them learning from the professors. All right, I've been talking about this for a few months now. Why? Because it's important and it's helping me. It's a handheld red light therapy device for pain and inflammation called the Super Palm 1050. I use it right at home, and what I really like about it is it's actually working on my back and my knee, and no drugs, no invasion, and wow, have I generally noticed a difference. Here's how it works. SunPower LED makes devices that deliver red and near infrared light energy directly into your cells, reduces pain and inflammation. The science is called photobiomodulation, or PBM. also known as red light therapy. You guys have heard about that. This isn't some trendy wellness fad, though. PBM has been researched around the world for decades. In fact, according to the PBM Foundation, over 100 million patient treatments have been performed without any documented side effects. The engineering is impressive, too. SunPower LED devices feature a patent-pending cooling system that lets you hold it closer to your skin, allowing deeper light penetration to reach your pain and inflammation. You can treat arthritis, knee pain, back, even tinnitus, joints, and more. The handheld Super Palm 1050 also creates what's called a wall of light. The LEDs project at a 90-degree angle, which eliminates hot spots and spreads light evenly over a wider area, making it 5 to 9 times more effective than many alternative technologies. These are medical-grade PBM devices you can use at home, and they're also used by dentists, chiropractors, physiotherapists, wellness centers, and even researchers studying PBM. If you want to learn more, check them out at sunpowerled.com. If you use the code MARLOW, you get 10% off. Feel better. Be better. Treat your pain and inflammation at home just like I do. sunpowerled.com. Use the code MARLOW.
It's exactly right. This is taking the textbook wars that conservatives have fought for decades and the woke professor and bias on steroids, and you're going to continue to see that. I think it will have a real shock, though, to that, effete left intelligentsia that is so proud of their, $250,000 degrees and their, woke studies when they realize the price of intelligence is going to zero. All that, quote, expertise is now one prompt away that a kid who's 10 years old sitting on a playground is going to have access to. And I think one of the benefits of AI, and I go through this very deeply. In fact, I actually give you kind of the prompts that'll help you to be able to do this. One of the biggest, most simple but powerful in the education space is the explain this to me like I'm in the 5th grade prompt.
Yeah, I love this.
Okay,
I love this. Yeah, Winton poses a really tough question about quantum physics, and he is the additional answer is gobbledygook. But then you say, explain it to me like I'm in the 3rd grade, and it gives a great analogy on how that makes perfect sense.
And it's so good for parents because how many of us get these little beautiful minds of our beautiful children, and they ask these a great question, and then we look at our wife or our husband, and you kind of go, man, I don't know what quantum fusion, whatever the topic is, and then if you go to Google, it gives you all these peer-reviewed academic journals that are just as hard to understand. This is translating now, assuming it's accurate, right? And that's why hallucinations matter. These things are going to be a game changer. The flattening of the I'm a 5-time PhD and, women's studies, whatever thing and such, that is going to be a flattener. The ability for low-income kids in rural communities to have world-class education, that is going to be a benefit. There are a lot of roses, and that's why in the book I really try to show the hopeful positives as well as these real threat vectors.
Right. Okay, let's talk about a place where I'm excited, which is medicine. This is, of course, my wife's field and most of her family, but it feels like AI medicine could make it so that we have a great tool for doctors, and we might need fewer doctors potentially, and we could see really rapid advancement in the desire to try to cure disease and help us live longer.
It's one of the things I am actually very optimistic about, and I say it in the opening of, my dad and my stepmom. My dad is a surgeon, now retired. My stepmom also retired, a nurse. My mom was a preschool teacher. So I think we just talked about the education hopeful. I think the science and medicine, I know your wife is a doctor, that is a very exciting area, assuming, again, the ethics are, there beyond the way it's used. The reason why is a couple things. One, we've already seen the Nobel given for Demis Hassabis, who is a world-class AI leader for AlphaFold, which was looking at proteins. The reason why this is so powerful, AI excels in pattern recognition. If somebody said you only have, 2 words to explain what it does, pattern recognition. Now, think about molecular structures, chemical structures, the scientific world. It is about patterns and connection. And the problem is that we can't get through, whether you're talking about DNA analysis or any other kind of thing, massive pattern recognition structures. But now we can. The other thing is there's so many things that peer-reviewed academic journal studies have gone through, but we didn't see another connecting point because it gets lost in these trillions of data points. Think of it like the stars in the sky. And now you can see new constellations, then connections that never used to be able to be seen because either we didn't have the time, we didn't have the money, we didn't have the ability to be able to synthesize all that information. Even if you just leave it at that, and you don't have to believe that it's going to become sentient, or you don't have to believe that it's going to have some kind of, soul or whatever, just pattern recognition at scale is going to unlock an enormous amount of scientific and medical possibility. So I am hopeful about that. One thing that, where this gets a little murky is in this whole issue of, Neuralink and, brain chips and implants. Because what people say is when you go to transhumanism, meaning beyond just human, transforming beyond humans, this merger and the singularity between human and machine, parents are going to perhaps one day, this probably not for a while, have to make a moral choice. If I don't have an augmentated child with a neural link, will they even be competitive in the job market? Will they even be competitive as a worker or in education if one kid is natural human up against a kid who has literally all of AI in their system? This isn't some movie. I mean, Neuralink is a real thing. It's here. Now, it's used mostly in a therapeutic context right now to help people who've had brain injuries and so forth. But these are the kinds of things that, Ray Kurzweil and others, really futurists, talk about and really bring up massive moral and ethical quandaries for us. So there again, roses and landmines.
And this is exactly where I wanted to end up for this conversation, is I want to talk about the singularity, talking about the transhumanism where humans are going to be part robot. And I find that the ethical questions this raises are limitless. I mean, I feel like we could spend hours of fleshing all of those out. But you raise something that is a deep concern to me, that you will be non-competitive unless you harness your brain to a robot chip of some sort. And all of a sudden it comes to what is the human experience anyway? What is it supposed to be? Do we really want our brains being manipulated by robots? And how do we know, how will we ever feel confident where the human ends and where the robot begins? And you can already see that this is going to be adopted to some degree because we have these things which is basically a really a 1.0 version of the singularity that we constantly have our phones around. And they're, as you write in the book, we spend the whole day with them at arm's reach. Like they're not without our arm's reach the entire day. And this is true even for me, who has a deep desire to get off my phone. The first thing I do when I'm off of work mode is generally I'll put in a podcast or an audiobook. So or I'm working out and I'm listening to some music or audiobook or something. And so it's all of us. We're all doing it, even people who try to make a conscious effort not to do it. So I'm really concerned about some of this stuff. This isn't clanker robots in our house that are kind of creepy washing the dishes for us. This is our brain that we're going to be part robot at some point, perhaps. It's really crazy to contemplate.
Yeah, Alex, one of the most embarrassing and humiliating moments of my week is, when your iPhone periodically says, here's the average number of hours you've spent on your phone this
every week. It's so embarrassing.
It's so embarrassing because you just say, this is not what I wanted. I didn't want to look at a screen. I wanted to look at the sky and eyes and my family, my friends, and all my people.
Can I tell you, I took my kids to swimming, and they're small. So the swimming is 30 minutes. It's kind of far away. So it's maybe like door to door, we're like 75 minutes. And I left my phone recently, and I've been telling this story to people. Like over and over again, I left my phone for 75 minutes and how I really enjoyed it. But the fact that I feel the need to repeat it to everyone, that I had 75 minutes free of the phone 3 weeks ago once. I mean, it just shows you how bad it already is.
It's a great triumph. Yeah. And I say that, I mean, you're right. That section you're talking about in the book where I say, how many of us, if we were going on a family vacation and you forgot your phone, or even going, to dinner, you would turn your car around to get your phone. What I suggest and what I say is that is a form of a early part of a cyborg reality, because it really is, our phone is connected to us almost constantly. And so, it's an interesting theoretical debate, right? When you say, okay, the singularity, fusion of human and machine, and it sounds like you're talking about a Terminator robot, but really start to think it's a very humbling thing when you really say, wait a minute, am I already kind of getting there? Like, don't I look and have my phone attached to my human body almost all the time? So that's the first part of it. The second part of it, though, is that this neural, and chip stuff, the discussion we're just talking about, not just Neuralink, but that whole area is advancing very, very rapidly. That is not far away. The other thing is with AI glasses, which is, think about this, with the Ray-Bans that you now have from Meta. Now, that's an external AI fusion with your body. It's not putting it inside your body. You're wearing it. But think about the power of this, and those in AI fraudsters and crime. This is a real problem. I can put facial recognition in what looks just like regular glasses. I can walk down downtown, Manhattan or your city, wherever you are. I can see a total stranger, and it can identify her name, who she is, look up everything, and I can walk up as though we're long lost friends. She doesn't remember. Oh, Sally, I haven't seen you since high school. How have you been? Are you still working at enter name of, place? And that becomes a real danger and a real fraud mechanism. AI fraud and crime is a massive topic and a huge problem with data privacy. So that external ability to wear your wearables, as it's called, wearables in AI is the next part as we inch closer toward this transhuman fusion of machine, the singularity of humans and machines merging. So, when you hear that, it sounds like it's some crazy, kooky kind of, sci-fi thing. It's here and it's getting closer. So what first it was our phone, then it's a wearable. We're already working on the internal stuff. And then if you do that, well, am I going to be able to be competitive when, 20 people in my company have an AI chip and they're in executive C-suite leadership because they've got speed and efficiency and knowledge that my human brain could never compete with? This is why I wrote Code Red, because this is all where it's going, and you got to understand all these different fault lines, all these different pressure points, so that you can get yourself through this for you and your kids. But I will tell you, the speed is what is freaking everybody out. In the Industrial Revolution, electricity, it took decades to wire the country, right? I mean, or to pave the roads for the interstates. And I go through the history of that. I cite the time. I show you all that. The reason why AI is different, 91% of people in America already have a phone, which is the delivery device of AI. So once you've got that delivery device already baked in, the lightning speed with which you can make sure that scales is very different than what we saw in the Industrial Revolution. So you had decades to sort of get used to and, upskill your skills and kind of learn how, as factory and mechanization and all the, factory assemblies and so forth. Now this is moving so fast. If you're not ahead, you're behind, and you've got to stay ahead. And that's again why the name of Code Red of this sort of alarm or alert.
Well, Wyndon, we have not covered the waterfront here. We have not gotten into AI defense, which again could turn out to be a positive, though with a lot of risk factors. I do want to get your opinions on AI Jesus, which we're seeing some AI Jesus pop up. We're seeing AI George Washington. I want to get your thoughts on some of that. And there's just a number of things that I feel like are both opportunities and are real deep risks about the moment that we're in with AI. But I will encourage everyone in the meantime to pick up a copy of Code Red. And it is one of the books of the year, if not the book of the year, I think, so far. And you will want to read it. You will probably want to share this with someone who you think might be in one of these industries that could see a lot of upheaval. This book might provide them comfort. It might scare them into doing something that could be productive for their lives. So it's a really essential, this is an essential text from Winton Hall, who isn't just a friend, but is a brilliant person, as you guys have gotten to witness here over the last hour and a half. We're going to do this again, Winton, probably sooner rather than later. So So there's a lot more to do, I think, on this subject matter. I really want you to introduce everyone to all the players in the space, both in terms of the companies and the individuals and where they're coming from, because they're going to be so involved in shaping our future. But if we opt out on this thing, this will be my final word, then I'll give you the last word, Winton. If we opt out, then we are ceding the future to the masters of the universe only, and the really activated, generally left of center entrepreneurial class that I feel like is a deep, deep risk. And so we got to get involved. And Winton he's inviting you in, showing you the water can be warm. I'm not saying it's the warmest ever, but it can be warm for you. So you got to start. This is a great entry point into this book. And of course, when you spend 2 years on something like this, even if you feel like you know AI, you're going to learn a lot too, I think, from just hearing Winton's perspective on all these things. But Winton, anything you want to leave the audience with for now?
Oh, I thank you so much for that, and especially coming from an author like yourself. I will say this: you can learn this. Don't be afraid or think, oh, this is so complex and it's so beyond my understanding. The reason I wrote this is to be simple without simplistic, really to help people. Like I said, I didn't even want to write this book. I have a wonderful career and I love what I do. I felt like I needed to do this because I wanted to be I know how to be a storyteller, so I wanted to help people to really understand this. You don't have to have a specialized knowledge. I think most of you are going to find this is way more fascinating than you ever realized it was, and also consequential. I really think that we don't need to get into a doom loop. We don't need to just unilaterally disarm. Certainly not conservatives. That would be, I think, a disaster. I think we need to lean in. We need to lead. We need to get prepared. We need to know how to do what we always do, which is, take personal responsibility for our family and for our communities and for our country, and make sure that we're ready to rock and roll with this and know how to be able to get the upside and avert the negative. But I think it's actually going to be a really important thing for you to do that. And I think you'll feel a lot more confident, because I think so much of it is just fear and people don't really know what's true and what's hype and what's myth. So that's why I wrote Code Red, and I hope you enjoy it.
And you will enjoy it. You will learn a lot. You are going to a really interesting world when you take on this book, but it's a world we're all going to anyway, so you may as well be prepared. Thank you, Winton Hall. Thanks for Misty for putting this together, and all of you in the audience for telling 10,000 friends and family members about all the cool stuff we're doing on The Marlowe Show. Make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed, please, and I'll talk to you next time.